photographer. I'm really excited that she's going to share some tips with us. So, Prairie, I think I'll just turn it over to you.
Alright, well first we're going to talk about what kind of backgrounds you want to use. Mostly we're going to start with just like a plain white one here. A lot of people want something like that. And typically you want your background to be substantially wider than the piece you want to shoot because really, this is kind of short. So if I was shooting a piece like this, really it would want to be farther forward on the background, so that way we got a good distance between the two. Two reasons for that is first of all, you want the background to have quite a bit more light than the front piece, especially when you're shooting on white, because that way the background is overexposed and you're not going to get like kind of a gray colored background. It's really going to pop on a computer screen. And then secondly also, if there's any dirt or anything on there, it'll be a little out of focus. Farther away. This one is actually just butcher paper, so if this was a real photography paper, you wouldn't be able to see the light through it. I didn't bring real paper because I didn't want to get destroyed.
What paper is it?
You can get photograph backdrops over at
this is
just butcher paper.
Oh, okay.
It's really too shiny, and you can kind of see it has a little bit of modeling to it. So, photography paper tends to have a little more tooth to it, almost like a drawing paper, and pretty thick and very matte. You can get it in all different colors. But generally I would prefer like a white if you're doing dirt photography, or black, or they also have some nice neutral grays. If you want to go for like a graduated background, those typically are made from vinyl. And they're a little smaller. The paper comes on like big 4-foot rolls. You know, if you're doing it with a couple other people, you can cut it up and stuff if you wanted. But the vinyl ones come in all different sizes. And typically you want to get one larger than you would think, of course, because it's the same kind of deal. And those ones you can get from B&H Photo Supply. It's an online company. They have a really nice selection of vinyl backgrounds. You can also get those in solid colors as well.
What's that, D&H?
B&H.
B&H. B is in the way.
Yeah. And I can tell you guys in the stores later as well if you have any specific questions. Vinyl backgrounds are good. They're a little more durable than a paper background. They're going to be more expensive than a paper background, but that's what you're going to want if you want that kind of graduated look. As far as shooting jewelry in front of the graduated background, they don't tend to become really small enough for jewelry. So what you want to do then is move the pieces pretty far. Like I'll shoot jewelry like way up here in the background, like way in the back. That way, you know, you kind of tighten the graduation up by moving it farther in the background. And then it's also good too, because it's easier to light separately. And yeah, and you also get those in black and white and stuff. But like I said, the vinyl does scratch. So I would typically use a paper just because it's cheaper and comes in a lot bigger pieces. You can also shoot, like if you wanted to do something on something shiny, like something small, you can use like pieces of reflective acrylic, like plastic sheeting. You know, you can buy those in tap plastic or Burnside or whatever. I would stick, if you want to do the reflective acrylics, to the ones that come with paper attached to them. If you buy like the colored ones that don't have the paper on them, they're going to be scratched to shit. So typically the black and the white comes with the paper attached to it, keeps them clean. And you can, if you get a pretty big piece, you can actually kind of angle a little bit too. So if you want to shoot something like hanging down on it, with reflection underneath, and then still have the acrylic in the background, you can do that by angling the acrylic really slightly. Another way I've tried is actually shooting down through a piece of glass. If you wanted something kind of behind the piece, but you wanted the piece lying down, you could put like a sheet of glass and then put your whatever you wanted behind it down like a couple feet and then shoot down through it. Is another good way to do it.
What's that?
It makes it, if you put it down farther, you can put things kind of out of focus. Like I've done it where you like lay jewelry on a piece of glass and then you like put something down a couple of feet, like with like some plants or something you want kind of out of focus in the background, you know? And then you can kind of get that same depth. And then it also makes it so you can light the background separately as well. Yeah. Shooting on fabric. I know a lot of people shoot on fabric. It's impossible to get the wrinkles out of fabric. I've tried everything. If you really have a piece of fabric you want to shoot on, I would recommend spraying and mounting it to a piece of paper. You know, so you can still get that nice seamless look. If you want to get fancy with it and like completely remove the background digitally later and put in something else on the computer, you can shoot on a digital green or blue background, which you can remove later in a photo program using like a color select. That's how they do a lot of stuff in movies and stuff. If you're shooting two-dimensional work, you want to hang it really flat on the wall with a black background. That way you're not going to get any reflective light or anything. And you want to shoot those straight on.
Is there any way flat image on the wall. Because when you shoot flat, usually micro
A little bit of distortion.
Yeah. Is there any way to get rid of that or not?
You use a slightly longer lens, so you're not quite so close, and a little less distortion.
Okay.
You know, like you use a fisheye lens. Really, the trick to that is to get the piece really centered. You know, really get your camera really centered. Like I measure it out on the floor with like a grid and everything. You know, and then just keep it really level without minimizing the distortion. I just want to talk about lighting. Typically, most people, if you don't have like lights, you want to. I would recommend actually using natural daylight. You can really get into lamps and stuff, but some of the best, like just home shot, studio stuff I've seen, people just use windows. Because, you know, it's big, bright light, it's a good color spectrum too, it's pretty neutral. The trick when using natural light is you want to be sure to diffuse it. You can do that either with like a big sheet over the window. You want to use something that's really white. You know, any kind of off-white is going to give it a thin cast to it. Also, you could take like just like with tissue paper, tape it over the window, you know, to really diffuse the light. You know, and then, so like if this was the piece here, I'd want the window like on the side though. You don't want the window behind you. That way the light's kind of coming from the side, you know. And that way also you can use reflectors on the opposite side to kind of fill in the light.
What are reflectors?
I'll get to that in a second. I got my cards mixed up. We're doing something here. Alright, so typically with the lighting, you want your main source of light, which is like the main light, kind of off to the side. So if I was shooting this guy here, and I want my main light source over here, I can put like a main light kind of this angle here to kind of light the side. Typically you don't want to light it straight on because you're going to get funky shadows. And then you also have a secondary light, which is going to be your background. You want that, you know, to get here. If you have used a graduated background, you don't really want to overdo the lighting on the background because you'll kind of wash out the graduation. So typically I'll use a brighter light on a white background. It really kind of blows it out. If you want to use like lamps or something, be sure if you're using a synthetic light to use all the same temperature bulb, use the same bulb for everything. If you have like halogens on one side and fluorescent on the other side, you're going to get all kinds of weird illusions. So be sure to use the same temperature lights. Go for the high wattage lights. This isn't a job for low wattage LEDs or fluorescents or anything like that. You want really bright, you know, hot lights. So you got your background light, you got your main light, and then some people will do a little bit of a backlight on their pieces too, to kind of highlight it, you know. That's one that really brings out that fuzzy in your hair and stuff. Really kind of lights it up. And so then once you have your main light source, you want your secondary light source. So you can get things like this as a prefab reflector, like I was talking earlier. These are coming really handy. This is what you're going to use to really kind of get your fill light. So if I have my main light coming from this direction, your camera's that way. You kind of put the reflector at the same kind of opposite angle on your piece to kind of fill in the side light. You can also use a second light for this too, just something not as powerful. And then also, if you're shooting on a window or something, I would recommend using like even a really big reflector to kind of fill in your background. So you can use something like this, where it's just, you buy these at that B&H Pro Photo Supply place. You can buy these a lot of places. These are actually pretty affordable. They come in. Yeah, you can use these. You can use big pieces of mat board. You can use big pieces of mat board with tinfoil attached to them. You could probably even use like the reflector thing you put on the inside of your window, you know, it's kind of shiny metal. That's pretty bright. This one has a diffuser in the middle, so that you can use if you want to use that to diffuse light instead of tissue paper or whatever, which is nice if you're shooting outside, because then you can put it over something. I mean, it needs to come to too. If you want to shoot people or something, you can get a nice diffused light. Then it also has a white side, which is what I typically use. And then it comes with gold also, which is normally used more in like portrait photography, because it gives it that kind of warm hue. And then a lot of times I'll use the silver as well. The only time you really want to be careful with the silver side is if you're shooting something that has any kind of shine to it. Because I found like glass or ceramics, a lot of stuff will actually kind of pick up the crinkles in it, you know, and you'll see that in the piece. So typically the white side is a little safer to use. So you use one on the side and then a big one on the background to kind of light that up. So when you're picking out your lighting though too, if you are using a synthetic lighting, you can balance the white balance in your camera. Most of the cameras have a WB setting, white balance setting. If you don't adjust that, it's normally pretty standard with the natural daylight. If you're using like a flash or something, which I'm not really going to recommend the flashes, like they're pretty straight on. But those tend to be a little warmer, or like, you know, like a halogen or something, just to be kind of yellow. Fluorescents give that kind of blue cast, which is, I think, the hardest to take out later. So I would recommend not using fluorescents. I've made a couple light boxes myself where I took like a small Tupperware container and lined the inside of it with tin foil. And then I mounted a couple of power strips on the inside of it. So I have a whole bunch of plugs on the inside. And then you can get those little screw-in light socket things that you plug in. You know, then you can plug in like 10 lights or something in that thing. And it's pretty bright. It does get kind of hot, but the foil really does help reflect it. And then you just want to put some kind of diffuser in front of that. So if you use any kind of synthetic light, be sure to diffuse it. Because you never want any kind of direct light. It's going to be way too harsh. And makes it look kind of funky.
Can I ask you a question? I have like a prefab light box. And it's got like, it's made out of
White fabric.
yeah, like a yeah. Anyway, that seems like a hard way to, when things are in there, to then have like lights and reflectors. Like it seems too small now if I'm thinking about it.
Some of those are kind of tight for the jewelry stuff. The inside of the white of the thing will actually reflect quite a bit too. So typically with that, instead of trying to use a reflector or something, you want to use like a secondary light. So you want a brighter light on this side, a softer light on this side, and then on the white you want the brightest light on the background, so it's really blown out.
And so where would you put that? Because if the entrance is here, and the box is like this, how would I light the background without lighting?
You have to put it above, or you can put two on either side, or even all three. I mean, if you want to do the white, the more light the better. You really can't get too much on the back. Just kind of down through it. But those actually work really well because they can use the light themselves, so you don't have to mess with
The
it.
lights on the outside.
Yeah, it's the lights on the outside, but you do tend to need a lot
focus
brighter
it in
light.
terms of like where you're directing it more. That's the trouble I
Yeah.
have with the white, is trying to make it really white.
Yeah, so you really need, so if this was in your box and this piece was here, you really want the light pointed just at the background as much as you can. And if you're having a lot of problems with the background light getting on your piece too, you could take like some foil or something and kind of try to block it off on the edge of the light, really make it tighter, so you get a little tighter. And that seems to work pretty well. Does anyone else have any questions about light?
Any particular kind of bulb? I mean, if there's natural light bulbs, is that better than just the regular?
Not necessarily. As long as they're all the same, it shouldn't matter. The daylight ones, I have used some like daylight fluorescence before, and it does kind of do that kind of green cast. So I tend to stick more with like the halogen lights just because it's more traditional.
It's not like the lights like
Daylight. Halogen. They are very bright. They tend to show up yellow in the dark light though. But any kind of indoor light, because anyone's taking pictures inside those, it always looks kind of warm toned. But there is a setting in your camera where you can adjust the white balance for a flash setting or something, and that'll take that into consideration when you're shooting, which is a good thing to do if you can ahead of time. That way you're not trying to balance all your photos the same later on.
So, when you balance your white setting, what does that mean? You add more white, you have less white?
When you balance your white setting, it has a couple different options. It'll ask if you're shooting like under like a tungsten light, or if you're using flash, which is typically the warm tone lights. So if your pictures are warm, you want to set it to that. Or like it has a fluorescent setting, which will kind of take out the blue or something. But typically it's more in a daylight spectrum.
So it gives you options of, okay.
Yeah, it has normally has 3 different options.
My problem usually is the reflection. You know, my pieces are roundish, and you know, it looks good, and then the picture comes out with certain spots where you just see that reflection. Is that too little light then, or is that because I don't have the reflection?
Probably because you're not diffusing it enough.
Okay.
If you are ending up with a lot of reflections, you can use a polarizing filter. It's kind of basically like polarizing sunglasses, you know. It does make your photos a little dark, but it actually has a ring that you can spin, and that will actually allow you to adjust the glare a little bit. So you can take that out a little bit. But if you use reflectors and, you know, diffuse the light really well, it should be less harsh.
But I generally notice if I usually hold my camera in one hand and I take the light, have it on a pole and move it around, and I'm able to control it this way. If I would add more light, could I eliminate that problem altogether?
More light, not necessarily. It's more even light. It might look more spread over the surface. Yeah, and just diffusing it in general is the best way to do it. More light might cause more reflection, but really you're going to need a certain amount of light to take the picture. So if you use more light, you're just going to adjust your f-stop or whatever, and it's not necessarily going to be that much different as far as the reflection goes. But maybe using a larger diffuser or trying like that natural daylight on the windows. You're probably going to give you the softest light as far as the reflection goes. Any other questions on light?
I have done a hotspot like you said on my base, got these hotspots like you said, like
And that is something that a polarizing filter
and
can help with.
that really make then you Photoshop a little
shooting outside and you want to diffuse the light, I've heard of some people that have shot inside their tents. You know, because it has a nice top. You could even, if you wanted to, you roll the paper come in 4-foot widths is a half roll. So typically a whole roll would be 8-foot widths. So it's plenty wide if you want to shoot like a person standing in front of the background, you know, having a diffuse light. In that case, if you shoot outside and you have an overall diffused light, instead of having your main light on the side, you're going to want your big reflector to be your main light. You know, kind of, because that's going to be bringing the most light. And then you can have a secondary reflector on the other side as well. So you get all kinds of reflectors going on. Which is why poster board's good, because it's cheap. Get lots of those. And then also, if you were shooting a tent outside and you wanted to have like the natural scene in the background, you know, you could shoot with the tent over your subject, with cut out of the frame, and you still have the background behind you, but you still have the nice diffused light over your subject. Which would be nice. We're just talking about reflections. When you're shooting something that has a lot of reflections, like Fred does that glass drop jewelry, which was the hardest thing I've ever shot. It really tends to pick up a lot of the background angles. Like when you did something like that, what I ended up actually doing was printing a graduated background on my computer, which is something you can do if you're doing small scale stuff. You know, you just pull up Photoshop and you can graduation and you can print it, which works kind of good. Sometimes it's hard to get the scene right in the graduation. It tends to go from gray to black pretty quickly. But if you play with it, you get it to work. And in that case, what I did was actually wrapped it all the way around the piece because, you know, it has that kind of optical quality, and that way the graduation is all the way around. So when you're doing your pieces, you want to be sure to look close and make sure that you're not getting like the edge of your background reflected inside the glass, or you know, if you have like you're shooting something with mirrors or something that you know you're not sitting there staring at yourself. And if you have that problem, one of the things you can do would be instead of say use the polarizing filter or use some glare, or if you're having like a really hard problem like getting yourself in the picture, one thing you can do would be to step back and use a slightly longer lens so you're a little farther away from your subject, you know, make yourself a little smaller in the frame. And then you can reduce the depth of field, which is the focal length of what area is actually in focus. And in theory, you can make yourself kind of out of focus in the background by making yourself farther away.
So I run into the mirror issue
Yeah.
every time I take a picture because I make mirrors. So what I did is I used the gray butcher paper and I have it cut really, really long, and so I pull it up and have the camera up here. And so you see, all you see is the butcher paper up.
That's a good idea. Just bring it all around.
So I don't get my mug in the mirror.
Yeah, and another thing to be careful when you're shooting stuff like that is that you do it in a plain colored room. Because really, like brightly colored walls, like the ceiling in here and stuff, would actually show up in your picture, and you would see that. Especially if you're shooting, like I was talking on the reflective acrylic, you'll get the ceiling quite often. So like the tents, like you were talking, is really good for that. Or if you just take like some chairs and put it next to each other, and you can like just hang some fabric or something over the top of that, and that really takes care of a lot of those reflections. All right, and then when you pose your pieces, a lot of times when I do jewelry, I'll hang them. So a good way to do that would be just to build like just a little four-sided square out of some lightweight wood or something small, you know, so you're not casting a lot of shadows. And then you can just kind of clamp it to the edge of the table, you know, so you have a bit of a matrix to hang your stuff off of. And then you can run like fishing line between the two pieces to hang earrings off of, or you can hang the necklaces straight off the top. When you're hanging earrings on fishing line, typically it's really good to use like a little bit of museum gel or wax. They're two products that are really nice. The wax is a little pastier, the gel tends to be a little clearer, almost a little easier to work with. The wax might be a little easier to clean up. But then you can put just a little tiny bit on the top of the ear wire right where it's hanging on the fishing line, and that allows you to adjust the angle a little bit and get a little more control over that. But you will have to take that out later in a photo editing program, which you'd have to do anyway because you have to take out the fishing line. So then, but if you're doing that and you're shooting like a post earring, that's not going to hang on the fishing line. What I would do then is run 2 layers of fishing line just right next to each other, like just like put a washer like between them so they're just like a couple millimeters apart. And then you can put the front of the ear wire over the top line and just kind of hook the back one underneath the back side of the fishing line, and that would kind of hold the post a little more level. And then you can also use the gel to pull that place as well.
I have gel.
You can use gel.
In my booth, if anybody wants some,
I know.
bring something and I'll.
You guys have a minute left.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, it's just this kind of wax. It's like a really low melting wax. Yeah. Another handy thing that I use a lot is poster putty. It's like, you know, it's just that white sticky stuff. It's really good for kind of sticking things up. I also use it if you're shooting like a stone on a dark color background and you want something light behind it to reflect the light. You can put a little bit of the museum, the little white putty stuff on the backside. It gives it kind of a light background, so you get a little more light reflecting out of it. Or you could use, if you want something shinier, you can use like a foil tape, like I have like this stuff here, like metallic tape. You can kind of tape that on the backside of the stone or something. As long as it's not translucent, you're not going to see it behind it. It'll let a little more light reflect through as well.
On the background behind it?
No, just on the back of the piece. So
That reflects light?
yeah, so like if I was shooting like a sunstone or something sitting on a piece of black reflective acrylic, it's really going to look flat because the black behind the stone's not going to reflect any light. So you can take like a little bit of the white poster putty and put it on the back side of the stone to make it a little lighter, or the reflective tape or something, you know, to make it pop a little more. Another trick with that kind of stuff is if you get a little more light shining on the piece from the back side, you know, you get a little more sparkle in the stone. If you're shooting faceted stones, you want to be careful because they definitely pick up reflections. When we did the photo shoot, I had one of the stands I was using to support the background has orange in it, and about 20 photos I was taking out little tiny bits of orange. So I was picking up. So you want to be really mindful of that. Okay, then as far as like posing things, generally, I wouldn't recommend shooting things straight on. They're going to look pretty flat, you know, pretty boring. You need a little bit of an angle on it, you know, and that way you kind of face the main face of it towards where your main light source is going to come from. If you're shooting multiple pieces, you know, you kind of want to keep them roughly in the same plane. You know, that way they're not, if you get them too far apart from each other, the back ones will start to get blurry and you'll run into more problems with that, which can be used to your advantage. I've seen some people that have done like body care products or something where you have like the one tube of chapstick in the front or whatever, and then you have a couple lined up behind it that get more out of focus the farther back they go, and that can be really effective as well. If you're shooting something you want to use more for promotional purposes, it might be good to do something a little more interesting than just the plain background. This kind of stuff's really good for jewelry and it's really clean, you know, but sometimes if you're doing something like apparel or jewelry or something, it might be good to have someone wearing it, you know, just to give it a little more, you know, placement as far as its purpose goes. So that's definitely something in consideration. So in that case, you know, you want to kind of keep that in mind, what's behind you as far as how you want to shoot it. Alright, so then when you're actually shooting, I would recommend using a tripod if at all possible. It'll help reduce any kind of shaking and everything. It makes it really easy to frame things, keep them clean. I've also used duct tape to duct tape my camera to things. Also effective, especially if you're shooting straight on. I would also recommend, if possible, to not use the button on the top of your camera. When you push the button, you're going to shake the camera. And a lot of times, if you're not using a flash, you tend to use a little longer exposure, and that can sometimes be noticeable. So if you can use the timer or like remote thing, I have a program where I actually plug a USB cord into my camera and plug it straight to my computer. It's called DigiCam Controller. It's a free download online. I would be mindful, sometimes the lighting on the one that show on the screen isn't quite exactly what the raw files are, so be sure to bracket. So be sure when you take your exposure to take exposures, you know, lighter and darker exposures, just to make sure you get the proper one. If you're shooting on a white background, most of the time when your camera uses a light meter, it's reading the whole thing as 50% gray. So this is going to be really bright. So sometimes cameras will have like, you know, plus or negatives, like if you're shooting in the snow or something that's also very bright, you can adjust your f-stop so it's going to be exposed a little more properly. So you can kind of do that a little bit as well. Be sure also when you're taking your picture, if you're going to use it for a business card or something, you may want a little bit of extra background, especially if you're doing a graduated or something, where you have some room to put your text or something. You know, so if you got your piece here, you know, you want plenty of space on the top and bottom, so if you have a little room to put some writing on it and stuff. The white you can always go and add a little more later, but especially with the graduated, it's, you know, it's hard to continue that if you need a little more space. When you're hanging the jewelry, it's best to like shoot it straight on. Same thing like I was saying with the two-dimensional stuff, just because you want that angle. If you're shooting on the reflective acrylic, you know, you want to shoot a little lower, but you still need the full piece of acrylic in the background. You know, you'd also do it like hanging, like I was saying earlier, where you angle the acrylic so you get the full background. You can actually buy the acrylic in like a bent piece if you want to get really fancy, but that's kind of expensive. Probably not necessary. If you're having problems adjusting the white balance like we were talking earlier, one of the things you can do is actually shoot with a gray card, which is 50% gray. And then when you put it in your camera knows that that is 50% gray. And a lot of the photo editing programs will have the color balance feature where it will ask you to select 50% gray. you know, it's got a little dropper and it's like 50% gray. And you just click on that part and it'll automatically adjust the whole thing to make it more light. So you can shoot that in like a separate exposure, so it's not like in your actual photo, and then you can see what the adjustment is when you want to do it.
So 50% gray is kind of like what you're going for?
50% gray is just a general neutral. Yeah, it's halfway between black and white, you know, so it's really just a plain gray color, and it has no color cast to it at all, you know, that way your camera knows if it's warm or cool or something, it knows what's
So
going
you
on.
said that's something you put into your camera?
Yeah, you buy like the photo store, it's just a little piece of cardboard. It's 50% gray. You just hold it in front of the picture when you're taking one of them. So you have, that's not obviously not the one you use for your final exposure. It will have a big card in it, but then you know what you're going for. I've also used color wheels and stuff in the past, but the gray card's the easiest thing because that's the program a lot of those things ask for is the 50% gray. Alright. And then when you actually get to the editing part, the program, a good free editing program is GIMP. Online, it's kind of similar to Photoshop. It's pretty easy to use. It's also free online. Use it, GIMP, G-I-M-P. It works pretty good on most computers. Be sure when you're doing photo editing to work in layers. That way, what I'll do is actually take my original picture and then make a copy of it. Just put it right on top of it so you can't even see the background copy. And then I'll work on that from that. And then you do all your adjustments and stuff and further layers on top. That way, the original photo, if everything goes to hell, it's still in the bottom there somewhere. You can dig it out if you need to start over. And you don't have to, it doesn't make your files a little larger, but that way it's a little insurance to have the original photo still in there somewhere. And YouTube, of course, is a great place to learn how to use it. When you're all done, I would recommend before you send it to printing to print a hard copy. Everything's going to look a little different on paper than it's going to look on your screen because your screen is backlit. And screens actually vary quite a bit in color. So you can calibrate your screen to make it proper, or just printing out something before you send it off. It's always a good idea. See what it looks like. I guess that's actually most of it.
What about cameras? Do you think people use their phones and
Those will work fine. Yeah, I wasn't going to get too much into specific cameras, because all this stuff will work fine on these cell phones. I've seen actually really good photos taken with iPhones and stuff.
do you know of any that are better than others? Or?
I personally don't have any experience shooting on phones, so I don't know.
Well, I know on Etsy, I think people use a lot of cameras, don't they?
Use phones.
Phones. Actually, I haven't been on Etsy in a while, so the last few years things have changed a lot. But there used to be just simple cameras people used to get these great photos. So it's really just about using some of these tips.
Yeah, just the
It's not so much about the camera.
No, the cameras, especially like if something for like a website or something, if you're not going to blow it up really big, it's not really that important. You'll probably, with the technology nowadays, you'll probably get just a prime photo on an iPhone or something. The only thing with that is you can't get like the polarizing filter or those type of things, but it's not really an issue for most people.
As far as computers and computer skills, what percentage of the courses do you, besides just the camera, having a computer as an accessory, how important is having computer skills?
Depends on what you're doing. I do quite a bit of stuff on computer. I'll actually go, especially with reflective objects like jewelry and stuff, and take different exposures of the same thing and combine them in the final one. That way, like I'll take the stone from one image and put it in different ones to do that kind of stuff. But you don't necessarily need a lot of computer skills. You're really meticulous about your lighting. Make sure everything's really clean. That's a really big trick, is to make sure everything's clean. If you're shooting things with tags on them, take the tags off. Unless it is something you want in the picture specifically in the front, like, look, here's a tag. Otherwise, just take them off. It's ridiculous.
Talking about skills, what made it really easy for me is the Easy Cube. I don't know, what do you think about that? But it's just an Easy Cube. It's like it's like a tent that I put up. It's a 4x4 thing, and I have the lights there. All I do is I hit the switch and I take pictures. So the only thing is I need to adjust the reflection a little bit. I think that's why this can be very helpful.
Where'd you get that?
Pardon?
Where'd you get that?
I just ordered online Easy Cube, and
So
they have
you have
smaller
like
versions.
from,
And I have it set up in,
Image photo or whatever.
it doesn't matter,
Yeah,
24 hours. light is always the same, you know, just turn on the switch and it just use my
You're
cell
shooting through
phone.
it, right?
Pardon?
You're shooting through it.
No, there's like, it's a cube with a, you know, it's closed, I just take the front and open it up and have a graduated background in the, you know, in the back and put my
Yeah, where's your light source?
I have two big lights, I don't know what type of
Oh,
lights
you're
they are.
shooting through the fabric or something?
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I meant.
Okay.
Yeah, and then future lights. Those heads are great.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Good
I
idea.
paint the lights. Yeah, so the lights, these lights, and
No,
black
the,
umbrellas,
yeah,
it's really,
It's
a flex wheel.
yeah.
Oh, Lee, did you say cube or cube?
Cube.
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 They call them flex wheels. Flex wheels. They're flex.
Flex
Field.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, it's on YouTube.
Yeah, something like this would be good if you're shooting people outside too, you don't wanna do it in tent. I mean, you get these in like 4-foot diameter or something or whatever.
That's a great size.
You kinda hold it over something, you know, if you're shooting somebody outside, it's really good. Way to keep the light.
Everything's on there.
Yeah, we